law, education, health, free energy, money, debt. Awake Radio, deconstructing the dream world, one lie at a time.
You didn't think it was going to be that easy, did you?
You know, for a second there, yeah, I kind of did.
Okay, thank you for tuning in. June 23rd, Tuesday evening on Organic News here on Awake Radio. I am Catherine. April Waters is my YouTube channel, just the April, and it's Waters, Watters. And we have with us for the first guest someone who's returning, who was on before, Miss Pam Bailey, who spent, how much time in Lebanon did you spend, Pam?
10 days.
10 days in Lebanon. And you started, the website is called wearenotnumbers.org. And the mission on the website, there is really no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. I concur. When the world talks about the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians who live there, it is usually in terms of politics and numbers, specifically how many killed, injured, homeless, and or dependent on aid. But numbers are impersonal and often numbing. What they don't convey are the daily personal struggles and triumphs, the tears and the laughter, the aspirations that are also universal, that if weren't for the context, they would immediately resonate with virtually everyone. That's why established and aspiring word artists from around the world have joined with youth in Gaza to create We Are Not Numbers, individuals trying to change the world. Through this platform, we will share and celebrate the stories of the Palestinians of Gaza, with more experienced authors mentoring the novices. And so, yeah, that's about a little bit about We Are Not Numbers. And there's also 2 articles that you wrote. Palestinian refugees must not be forgotten on Al Arabi. So can you talk, tell us, what was it like over there?
Well, I mean, let me sort of bridge the 2 topics you talked about. So I spent most of my time, in Gaza. I lived there for 3 years. And in some respects, they're the forgotten people because people remember them only when there's a war going on. And once the war stops, there isn't politics going on, then people are pretty much neglected. And I would say it's happening right now because the war is done, yes, but there's no progress or reconstruction going on at all.
Right.
So the point of the We Are Not Numbers, and I'll tell you the reason why I went to Lebanon, is that we wanted to issue a wake-up call to the world to a certain extent by bringing out these human stories while helping the youth there improve their English and their ability to tell their own stories. They're not relying on foreigners to do it. Well, the Palestinians in Lebanon, I think, are even more forgotten because, at least Gazans are talked about when there is a war, when there's politics. But, I mean, can you remember the last time you heard anybody talking about the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon?
No, not at all.
No. I mean, they because there's no war, there's no violence. It's this grinding poverty that goes on year after year after year after year. And if you look at the Palestinian refugees, of all the places that they ended up, In Lebanon, they have the fewest rights. You know, they're in the worst purgatory, really. In Jordan and then in Syria before the Civil War, yes, they weren't citizens, but they could work. You know, they could pretty much integrate into the community. In Lebanon, that has not been the case. For 60-plus years, the Palestinians there have been sort of it's been in suspended animation. They not only are they not citizens, but their ability to work is highly restricted. They can't own property. They can't access the public health system, the social security system that they have in Lebanon. They pretty much, you know, are cut off from all the rights, and yet a lot of them have been born there. You know, I mean, it's a highly youthful population. The vast majority were born in Lebanon, and yet they're treated as foreigners. Actually, worse than foreigners.
Why are they being treated that way in Lebanon? I mean, I understand, you know, a lot of people, some people understand that, you know, Israel does not like the Palestinians, you know, so why doesn't anyone else? And they're just siding with Israel?
No, not at all, actually. I mean, in fact, Lebanon considers itself at war with Israel. So it has nothing to do with that at all. There's a whole bunch of factors that contribute to it. One of them, what the government would tell you, if you were to ask for an official statement about that, you'd hear two things. One would be that they think that they assimilate Palestinians too much. If they allow them to feel at home in Lebanon, then that is letting the international community off the hook. You know, they say, wait a minute, the Palestinians should be able to return to their homeland. And if we give them rights here, that is allowing them to think they can settle in and let the international community and Israel off the hook by saying, you know, you don't have any responsibilities to them. To say that they are the Palestinians by making it so that, you know, they don't have a permanent home until they go back home. But the fact of the matter is, I think that's just a sort of a show because it's been over 60 years, 60, you know, so that's ridiculous. It's absolutely not going to happen anytime soon. Will they be able to, and plus most of these kids, like I said, they were born in Lebanon. Yes, they identify as Palestinian, but they don't know anything else. Right. So then the other reason you might hear, which is the case, is Lebanon has what's called a confessional form of government, where it's a very fine balance between the different offices and different number of seats that are given to the different sects in Lebanon. So there's the Christians, there's the Druze, there's the Sunni, there's the Shia. And of course, if you were to somehow naturalize all the Palestinians, then there'd be this massive influx of Sunni Muslims. And that would tip the power balance. And there's people in Lebanon who would not like that. Then you have another reason where Lebanon has a pretty unstable government right now. A lot of Lebanese are poor. So like around the world over, they think if you all of a sudden let all these Palestinians work equally to me, it's going to jeopardize my job, you know? And you find that everywhere. You find that in the U.S., you know, people who are against immigration and immigrants. So it's sort of a common perception that, and yet the fallacy about that is that these people, Palestinians have been there, like I said, for so long, and a lot of times they end up doing work that, you know, Lebanese don't do. A lot of them are working under the table, you know, which means they live in a very precarious kind of situation. So those are the reasons you would hear. The reason why, you know, but the thing is that in Syria, before the civil war in Jordan, you know, that they've been able to let them work, you know, property and go to school, and it's not had any of the problems that Lebanon's afraid of. But that's what you would hear. It's a whole variety of things.
So, in this one article that you wrote that is entitled Palestinian Refugees Must Not Be Forgotten, it says Amnesty International calls the restrictions a violation of international law, including the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and the Convention of the Rights of the Child, all treaties signed by Lebanon. So how do they get away with doing it then?
Because is international, can you really point to that many times that international law is enforced?
Right, I know.
I mean, if international law is enforced,
It's
you
like,
have the Palestinians back in their homeland.
it doesn't even mean, it doesn't mean anything.
No, it doesn't, and the Lebanese would also say, by the way, I mean, I guess in their defense, what I would say is that, Lebanon has more refugees per capita than any other country in the world. Syrians have, there's been a massive influx of Syrians. So Lebanon is actually not a very stable country. They haven't had a president in more than 6 months. There's a very high unemployment rate for regular Lebanese. And so what Lebanon would say, and to some extent they're right, is they're not getting enough support from the international community in order to absorb that many refugees. Now, that doesn't really apply to the Palestinians, so they've been there for a long time. But then you add on top of 1.5 million Syrians, the government really isn't in a position, it's too weak. So really, I would actually agree with Lebanon on one thing, which is the international community has a much larger responsibility for this situation that they're not stepping up to the plate for. For instance, there should be a lot more resettlement of Syrians. The U.S. has been abysmal. We have been funding some of the rebels in Syria, and yet we take no responsibility to help resettle some of the refugees because there's no sign out there that the Syrian civil war is going to end anytime soon. So any thought that the Syrian refugees are going to be temporary is, a pipe dream. And that's actually it's the report that I wrote. Is an organization I work for called the Euro-Mediterranean Monitor for Human Rights. It's based in Geneva, but has a big team in Gaza. I do a lot of work for them, and they were the ones who sent me to Lebanon. And the focus of the report that's going to be issued next week is the number of protracted, they're called protracted or warehouse refugees. These are refugees who have now been refugees for 5 or more years. And that's actually a huge number around the world. The Syrians are headed that way. And yet we still model our refugee programs like it's temporary aid. And what we have to sort of wake up to is the majority of refugees today are spending 10 or more years outside of their country. So just providing temporary aid is not a model that's sustainable. And that does mean, and 85% of the countries taking these long-term refugees are poor developing countries, like Lebanon. And in order for us to expect Lebanon to do the right thing, we have to set up the plate more ourselves. And that means 2 things to me. One is resettling them more of them in our country, especially if we're contributing to the fighting. And number 2, it means the model for giving aid cannot be all relief. We have to start including developmental programs. So it's not just emergency food handouts, for instance, but it's helping them develop new skills, helping them to get jobs, so that if they are able to go back to their home countries, and hopefully they will, they won't be. I mean, they'll be totally useless at this point. And you have kids losing generations of schooling. You have adults who have no skills development. Right. So this thought that somehow we don't need to develop them, because they'll be going on to their home country. Well, by the time they're able to do it, they'll have no skills that are marketable. And then what? So we have to change the way we deliver aid.
You wrote in one of these articles about how the Palestinians are actually, really contributing to the economy in Lebanon, despite all the restrictions that they're under.
Well, and that's true for immigrants in general. I mean, think of the United States. So if you'll feel the same way about the Mexicans, for instance, and that it's taking away jobs. And it's true the world over that very often these individuals take jobs that nobody else will take, or they're being paid lower pay, and they're among the hardest workers because this is what their survival depends on. And in fact, you'll find people in Lebanon who will admit, that wow, without this kind of labor, the whole country would shut down. So, it's true that the economy is struggling. The answer, though, to me, is not to say people can't move. People should be forced to stay where they were born. That's going to define your destiny. You know, it's more how do we strengthen the economy so we can make it better. And I think the U.S. history has shown that we only got stronger and better and more competitive by having new people come in from other countries.
Right.
And the thing is that the desire to move, the desire to improve your situation, the desire to escape violence, and to keep your family safe is so universal and it's so strong. You can't stop it.
Right.
You know, people will see, regardless of what you do, however high the wall you build, it is not going to stop the human desire to provide for your family and to better your life somehow. It's just a basic human right. And I think we should, this idea we have, if we can somehow squelch that in people, is just wrong.
I mean, if we can just let them, you know, like live in their country peaceably instead of making it and driving them out of there.
Well, and it's not just peaceably. I mean, you have different reasons why they leave. You know, one is violence, yes. There's also a lot of people who leave that they're economic migrants because the poverty is so terrible. I would consider grinding poverty to be a form of violence as well.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, as long as there's a complete disparity in opportunity between one part of the world and another, as long as they can't provide for their families and they can't make a living and they, you know, as long as there's suffering like that, people will exercise their right to move.
Right.
And as long as we ignore that and just focus on, like, well, let's take the boat people, for instance. You know, there's been news reports about people who have been getting into smuggler boats and trying to cross the Mediterranean to Italy and Greece. And, of course, unfortunately, there's been great tragedies, you know, as a result because the smugglers are not reliable and you've had hundreds of people dying at sea. Well, one of the responses by Europe was to just send a military force, you know, over to Libya and to try to, you know, confiscate the boats and get the smugglers. And what they're doing though is totally ignoring
right.
the root cause.
Right. Well, that's
you know,
that's typical. Like they blame the effect and they overlook what's creating it.
Right. And so you have military response. Wall. You can't make a wall too tall. You know, it will not. The human spirit is amazingly resilient. Mm. And, you know, one of the first boats that you heard about sinking was back in September of 2014. And that was, that went from the area of Egypt. And I had a friend, a young Gazan that I knew who was on board that boat. And his father found out. He got to Egypt from Gaza because he had permission to go for medical treatment. He had been in an Israeli prison for a long time and had been injured in one of the wars and had just multitude of medical problems. Young man in his early 20s. And so he had managed to make it into Egypt, and he heard about this boat. He and his cousins heard about this boat going to Italy, and they had to pay about $2,000 a person. And he scraped it up. And his father heard about his plan and tried to talk him out of it. But you know what? His answer to his father and what he had said to me even earlier was that I'm dead now. You know, his life in Gaza, it was like being a living dead. And that's true in some of these other countries as well. When you feel like you have no future at all, no chance of a job, that's, you know, they have nothing left to lose. So it doesn't matter what you do with your military boat or how high you build the wall. When you're faced with no future, you're going to do what you have to do to try to, you know, to try to survive it. And we just don't seem to realize that.
You write about a woman, Haj, who was, she started a scholarship, the inception of volunteer executive director of Sabra Shatila Scholarship Program, launched in 2013 at Martyrs Square, the burial place for many of the individuals who were slaughtered in the camp by Israel-backed Christian phalangists 3 decades ago. And since the inception, the program has awarded 539 tuition grants to Palestinian students accepted into universities in Lebanon. So
Well,
that,
there's actually two scholarship programs. There's Zainab Hajj, who you mentioned. There's also a program called Unite Lebanon Youth, and they both provide scholarships. They're a little bit different. One picks the Unite Lebanon picks the smartest of the students, and it sends them either abroad or to the best. There's two really top-notch universities in Lebanon, and they send them there. What Zainab does then is take other students who are maybe not good enough to get that and sends them to other Lebanese universities. The problem is, and here's the problem now, because actually of the Palestinian refugees, only 4% get university degrees. That's a huge difference between Gaza and Palestinians in Lebanon, by the way. And the reason why it's so low in Lebanon is because there's a number of reasons why, but one of them is that there's a perception there that what's the point? They won't get a job. There's such restriction, like you cannot work in any profession. A Palestinian cannot work in any profession in Lebanon. So, for instance, Lebanon, there's one young woman who, her name is Iqbal Assad, who is the youngest doctor in the world. I mean, really, in the world, she was and she's a Palestinian from Lebanon. And where is she now? She's in the United States studying at the Cleveland Clinic. Why? Because the Palestinians are not allowed to be doctors in Lebanon. If you're a doctor, you can't. You're not allowed to practice outside the camp. And so, in a way, to me, that's really harmful to Lebanon because it's really wonderfully talented people who will leave, because there's no opportunity for them, none. So the scholarships, what's best for the kids, I hate to say, is to get scholarships outside of Lebanon because it's wonderful to provide the money that they need because they can't afford college. But the Palestinian refugees, because they don't get any assistance, so they have to pay. But then the other problem is, what jobs will they get when they're out?
right.
And so it's a real problem. So help is needed at all levels. It's fantastic that we have both organizations that are trying to pick the kids who can make it and then paying their way into university. But then we have to also look at what happens to them afterwards. In most cases, people want to emigrate because there's very little chance of getting professional jobs. Right. The few people who get university degrees will end up doing, working in a store or something.
It almost,
and there are some,
It almost sounds like the United States.
No, but much worse.
Yeah, right. Much on steroids.
I mean, it is a problem for youth around the world, but I mean, at a totally different scale, because in the case of Palestinians, there's an artificial, and it's actually not just the official laws, by the way. I'll give you one other example. Zainab, the woman that you just quoted as trying to help kids get scholarships. Zainab is in an interesting situation. She's one of the lucky ones in that she got a job. And her title is an assistant secretary, basically.
Right.
She's actually doing the work of an executive secretary, like the secretary, like with the CEO kind of person. But that job is not allowed for Palestinians. And even though, so she's limited. She's been doing a bigger and bigger job. She's been there for 10 years, but there's no growth. She's not allowed to get to be in the real job that she has. She really can't speak up. She can't say anything. And even though there are some employers that ignore that, there's a lot of informal discrimination, that happens as well. And they know if you're Palestinian, they can get away with not giving you raises, not promoting you. So it's unfortunate because there's very little incentive. I mean, in fact, I can't remember the percentage right now, but the number of kids who graduate from high school, Palestinian refugees I'm talking about, is like a third. It's like a third of them only even graduate from high school. And a big reason is because, why? I mean, if you know that you're going to probably end up in a menial job anyway, regardless, then why would you put the effort in to go to a higher school? And the other problem is that UNRWA, the other huge problem is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which is the UN agency charged with caring for Palestinian refugees specifically, are they're beggars. You know, they don't have any assured source of funding. They're constantly having to ask for donations, which means they're always short of funds. Everywhere I went, they talked about how poor quality the schools were. They pretty much rely on memorization. You know, that's their idea of teaching you is memorize. But, you know, also it's like because they have to go and beg people for money and Palestinians, you know, I mean, every time there's another big emergency, like, you know, Syria, for instance, everybody, all the governments, you know, give more money to that. They always end up getting the short end of the stick. And to me, having an agency that's basically providing essential services to the large population of a long period of time should not be begging for donations all the time. It should have an assured source of funding.
Right.
It's really, I mean, they've been reduced to beggars.
And
yeah.
So, and as far as this war ever ending, and you know, all of these occupations that drive these people out in the first place, I mean, there doesn't seem any sign of that, you know, turning around either.
No, I mean, Syria, there's no sign at all that. I mean, my prediction is Syria will end up breaking into different pieces, you know. But yeah, there's no sign that that's going to end peacefully anytime soon. There's no sign that there's going to be a peace that allows Israel to, and that allows the Palestinians to return to Palestine. So the international community really has to deal with this because putting it off, kicking the can down the road, thinking that eventually the Palestinians will go home and the Syrians will go home is just hiding your head in the sand.
And there's, you know, I mean, there doesn't seem to be anybody moving towards, you know, holding Israel accountable and ending their occupation and taking them to the, what is it, the CCI, the International Court?
ICC, yeah,
ICC,
no. And so, you know, what all the Palestinians will say is they're prepared to forego citizenship.
Right.
They're not asking for the right to vote, which is sort of basic. All they want is the right to work. And that, to me, is absolutely immoral on the part of the international community that we have not. I mean, I think that if the right parties went to Lebanon and said, we will give you the aid you need, you know, to make sure that your economy doesn't implode. That's what they're afraid of, the economy will implode or something. You know, but do what it takes. But having a people being treated this way for 60-plus years because we say we're waiting for a peace between Israel and Palestine, when it's, you know, that's complete farce.
Right.
There's no sign at all.
Right.
Well, anywhere close, and it's immoral.
Right. They're not even moving really in that direction. They're just.
They don't even talk about the Lebanon. I mean, in all the discussions, when there even is discussion about what a peace deal would include, no one talks about the Palestinians in Lebanon. They're not even part of the conversation.
Right. I mean, that's the whole point. It's you know, some people's idea of peace, like Israel's idea of peace, is them having, you know, all the leverage and the Palestinians having none. I mean, that's their definition of peace.
Yeah. So yeah, what I think has to happen for the Palestinians in Lebanon is that the international community has to go to Lebanon and say, here, we're going to give you this package of incentives to help you stabilize your economy. In return, you have to lift the restrictions on employment and on property ownership. And because then, you know what, if they did some, you know, if our dreams were realized and they were allowed to all go back to Palestine, which is, you know, big pipe dream, but if they were, then at least they'll have skills to use to build a new country, because the way it is now, they're not. So how is it helping anybody?
Right. How is that moving in the right direction?
No.
Right.
So that's a farce. I mean, it really is a farce. Anybody who thinks about it carefully would realize that creating an entire generation of dependent people without skills, without work experience,
Yeah.
It doesn't help anything, and it's a total. So that argument doesn't fly. And any economist would tell you that.
Right. Yeah, it's just perpetuating the problem.
Yeah. Now, no. And nobody wants to deal with it, so everybody ignores it and talks around it or pretends like it's not there. And that's why, to be honest, I mean, like I have a love-hate thing with agencies like UNRWA. I mean, that they do fill a need, but I think as long as they're there, people can ignore the problem, you know?
Right.
I mean, sometimes I think maybe something really dramatic is needed and says, you know what, this is not an emergency anymore, it's too long running, and now the people who created this problem need to pay the price. I think until people have to pay a price for it, they're just going to let it go.
Exactly.
I mean, they need the shock therapy somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, who's going to be the one to light the fire under the, I mean, I just want to say Israel. I mean, who seems to, be kind of at the root of, and
Israel,
the United
Egypt. I mean, there's a number of countries
States
that also allow this to happen.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is a big one. I mean, nobody is doing what they should do to bring this to an end. That's the U.S. It's the other Arab nations who talk a good game and do nothing. Nobody is, because they can't. It's gone this long, and nobody wants to deal with something unpleasant, and
right.
so no one that deals with it. And you've got these people who are, and I mean, you're talking about 300,000 people in Lebanon alone.
Jesus.
300,000 people.
And what is at the root of all of this? I mean, okay, so Israel is occupying Palestine, and now, the U.S. is in Syria, and adding more boots on the ground, and I mean, of course they'll say that it's because of ISIS or ISIL, or when it's really about just control.
Well, and by the way, the other thing they should be thinking about, and we seem to be totally unable to think about long-term consequences. But you take the camp Ain al-Helwa. Ain al-Helwa is the largest housing and refugee camp in Lebanon. It is a hotbed of unrest. And the thing people don't realize is that you cannot treat people the way they're treated and not expect a certain percentage of them to turn to militancy and terrorism.
Right.
And so they're that concerned about all the youth that are feeding ISIS or ISIL or Daesh, whatever you call them. They should start to look at the breeding ground.
Exactly.
And I'm just shocked at the inability to look at long-term consequences. You treat people that way, what do you think is going to happen down the road?
Exactly. Well, because the people creating it don't want to look in the mirror.
Yeah. And so, I know how a lot is, there's a lot of unrest there. There's people talk about militants coming out of there or whatever, and it's like, well, and that's what happened with Nar al-Barad. Nar al-Barad was a camp in the north of Lebanon, and back when Israel was invading Lebanon, that sort of created a vacuum, and that's when a militant group infiltrated Nar al-Barad and then gained some traction, and then you remember from your history, it all blew up about 8 years ago. Well, the same thing happened with Nar al-Barad now. And, when you have huge concentrations of people who are being treated like animals, I'm just surprised you expect anything else.
Exactly.
It's just incredibly short-term thinking.
And so people can find your writings on, am I saying it right?
Well, one thing I would encourage them to do is another reason I went to Lebanon is we're going to be adding Palestinian youth from Lebanon to We Are Not Numbered. I actually formed a partnership with an organization there, and they're recruiting youth right now. So I would actually really encourage people to go to wearenotnumbers.org. It's all Gaza-based right now, but we will be adding Palestinian youth in Lebanon soon. And this is allowing the youth themselves to tell their stories in much more compelling ways than I ever could. So I guess if I would encourage them to go anywhere, I would encourage them to visit that site, share it. We're going to be actually starting a campaign July 8th. That's the 1-year anniversary of the Gaza war of last summer. And we're going to be posting new stories, 1 year later stories, every day during that 50-day period. And then, like I said, shortly thereafter, we'll be adding Lebanese, Palestinian news from Lebanon. So I would say go there. And then in addition, yes, I write regular articles for Arundhati Roy, which is based in the UK. And I actually have a big report on Lebanon that I'm excerpting parts of it and publishing on Arundhati, but also the Euro-Mediterranean website, Euro-Mediterranean Monitor for Human Rights. The entire report about Lebanon will be posted there probably about a week and a half.
Thank you so much, Pam Bailey. Please go to the website wearenotnumbers.org.
And anybody's interested in being a mentor, if you're a published author, if you have some ESL background, English as a second language teaching background, we'd love to have you, and you can help these youth yourself.
Thank you so much, Pam Bailey.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to attempt, like last week, Jose LaSalle, who they have all the protests right when I am doing my radio show. And again, Jose LaSalle, who it's a no new NYPD, Mayor de Blasio wanting to add more NYPD rather than, moving towards solutions. They just want to keep doing more of what doesn't work.
Hello?
Jose? Jose, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, did the protest go on? Because, yeah, it is raining over here. Is it?
It's raining, but we are sticking through it.
So, okay, what is the protest about? De Blasio deciding that he's going to add more, how many more?
It's about the decision that the Blasio and the city council made to add 1,300 more cops, which, I'm saying, it's going to cost taxpayers $170 million plus all your overtime and everything else. And that money could have been used in the community to help people with social issues, dealing with more, better, helping people get better jobs, helping people find places where they could go to after school, especially young teenagers and centers and things of that nature. And also, help people to be able to just better their lives in these communities with other social social things that can help them.
What is I don't understand what does Mayor de Blasio say to justify the need for more police? Because we already have 25% of our population in jail as it is for basically non-crimes. I mean, if anything, they should be letting people out of jail.
Well, I mean, the Blasio caved into the city council and Bill Bryan, and this is the outcome of it. So the community is outraged. The community is pissed off. This is not going to help the community and police have anything to be working together, anything, because every day, people hate police more and more because of their aggressive policing that they bring into our community. And they don't realize that they're not only putting our life in danger, but they're putting their own life in danger because people are starting to fight back. Like when you push somebody to a corner, eventually you're going to fight back. And this is what's happening. And they don't see it, but they will see it down the road that their aggressiveness is creating a situation where it's dangerous for civilians and police.
Well, right. I mean, because, Jose, just talk a little bit about what it is that you do. You're with the Cop Watch Patrol Unit in New York.
My group, CPU Cop Watch Patrol Unit, we've been documenting police for like 2 years and exposing their true nature giving people an insight of what police does in these communities of color. And we've been doing a good job because of a lot of videos. Believe me, a lot of these decisions for a lot of these reforms it still hasn't taken place, but they are being on the table and supposed to be taking place because of videos like ours and other civilians recorded out in these communities, showing police aggressiveness and disrespect towards the community that comes to serve and protect, and they don't even live in it.
I mean, the bottom line is they're not really. Is everything okay over there?
Huh?
Is everything okay over there?
Yeah, we're doing okay, but we got the regular team here. We got Lombardo. We got the regular team from the Occupy Wall Street, who is a bunch of check breakers, and I guess if we start marching, they're going to start implementing what they know what to do best, and that's their aggressiveness tactics, how to assault and forcibly lock people up for practicing their First Amendment rights.
Right. So, again, it just seems clear that, trying to solve problems is not, the end goal. I mean, it just seems like keeping everything going is, which doesn't work is the end goal.
Yeah, I mean, ain't nothing going to change. This just made things worse for community of color. It made it worse for the police department. And down the road, we're going to see the outcome of this decision, which is it's going to backfire. And de Blasio will probably be the last term of mayor you ever have. And Bill Bryan will probably be the last time he will ever be a commissioner here. And we're going to continue to gather. We're going to continue to make sure that other individuals like Bill Bryan and de Blasio would never get a chance to sit down anywhere in the city council to dictate or to be a voice for the people.
So, I mean, I just wanted to, add that I kind of find it particularly enraging in light of, just recently what happened with Khalif Browder at Rikers Island, a 16-year-old, boy arrested for something so ridiculous as allegedly stealing a backpack. And even if he did, to throw somebody in Rikers Island at 16 years old, he was never charged, he never had a trial, and they had him in solitary confinement for 2 years, beaten by correction officers, beaten by other inmates. It psychologically pushed him over the edge. He reached out. He asked for psychological help that he didn't get. And he ended up taking his own life, what was it, about 3 weeks ago. So, and for de Blasio to be, his response, and this is his response.
Objection, guys. They're walking by. What you talking about?
So, I'm sorry?
If anything, if you go back there, there'll be more room there to take big boy back there. Yeah,
And is anyone speaking there, Jose, or is there?
No, we have a good crowd of different groups and organizations, and like I said, we got Lombardo, who is probably going to be the reason why a lot of people get hurt out here. And this is what we're dealing with.
Is he an NYPD officer, Lombardo, that you keep referring to?
Yeah, he's well known to be very aggressive and have no respect for people's First Amendment rights and stuff like that.
Right. Okay, Jose. Well, I hope de Blasio gets your message. And does not,
All right. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, Jose LaSalle from
Cop Watch Patrol Unit.
Cop Watch Patrol Unit. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye. Okay, next I am going to play a jingle.
Nobody can stop them. They're having their way with America. They want our guns. And if you're not with them, cops and military, then you will declare that you're with the Republic now. And don't tell me that I'm a weirdo because I'm upset about this, and I should only go get upset about my favorite football team winning or losing. Listen, I know what tyranny means. I know the bankers are putting poison in our food and water. I know the bankers have stolen $8.5 trillion. I know we're under War Powers Act. I know they're hurting us. I know they're carrying out New World Order. I know they've staged those terror attacks. You know what it's like to gut up to this and go out every day and go past the peer pressure and come out day one and say 9/11 was an inside job and lose most of the radio stations I was on? You know what it's like to go to sleep every night knowing you work for a bunch of psychotic killers and you bastards are probably going to end up killing me one day? You know what it's like knowing you've ruined my life? You know what it's like, you sons of bitches? I'm tired of your crap! You commit evil, you're part of an evil system, and we're standing up against you. And the Republic is going to defeat you in the end. Some of us won't make it personally through this, but a lot of us are. And in the end, you are going to be brought to justice. You're not invincible, and God's going to deal with you. And you are cursed to hell. I'm done. I got to get out of here.
Awake Radio, giving you the info you need without the screaming rant. awakeradio.us, awakeradio.co.uk.
Okay, well, I don't know about the screaming rant. Some things I think are definitely worth screaming and ranting over. And seeing as that I mentioned Khalif Browder, I am going to play a video that was I filmed at a vigil that they had for him a couple of weeks ago with Travis Morales from Stop Mass Incarceration.
So next up we have Travis Morales from Stop the Mass Incarceration Network, who's going to use his Occupy voice. You already hear him. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Travis Morales with the Stop Mass Incarceration Network. I'm a supporter of the Revolutionary Communist Party, and I'm here to read a statement from Carl Dix, who, along with Dr. Cornel West, co-founded the Stop Mass Incarceration Network. Carl is also a representative of the Revolutionary Communist Party. His statement reads, Khalif Browder's life was stolen by this system. The blood of Khalif Browder is on the hands of this system. Yeah. Khalif took his own life on Saturday, June 6th, hanging himself at his parents' home in the Bronx. He was driven to this by years of torture and brutality. Right. He was subjected to while being held at the Rikers Island prison for 3 years. Khalif was arrested at the age of 16, accused of stealing a backpack. He was held in solitary confinement for 2 of those years and repeatedly beaten by prison guards and other inmates. Prosecutors several times offered to release Khalif from jail if he would plead guilty to stealing the backpack, but he refused those offers, insisting on his innocence. After 3 years in prison, prosecutors dropped the charges against Khalif, and he was released from Rikers. But Khalif was unable to escape the damage that years of torture and abuse the system had inflicted on him. He was constantly afraid of being attacked in the subway or in his home. In December 2014, he was hospitalized in the psychiatric ward at Harlem Hospital Center. This past Saturday, Khalif's mother heard a noise and went out to her backyard. She saw Khalif hanging from a second-floor window with a cord around his neck. The criminal injustice system stole Khalif's life. That's right. Subjected him to the torture of solitary confinement for 2 years. Prosecutors who refused to indict the cops who murdered Eric Garner, Anthony Rosario, Nicholas Hayward Jr., and so many other victims of killer cops. Who forgot how to prosecute when charges were brought against the cops who murdered Amadou Diallo and Sean Bell. Persecuted Khalif for years on a charge of stealing a backpack. They used cruel beatings inflicted on him by prison guards to try to pressure him into copping a plea. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio issued a statement after Khalif died saying, quote, his, quote, story inspired our efforts at Rikers, unquote. What a fucking hypocrite! That's right. Yeah. He and his police commissioner, Bill Bratton, are presiding over broken windows.
That's right.
Policing that unleashes the NYPD to go after black and Latino people, especially the youth, for minor violations, even when they're doing nothing wrong. This criminalization will steal the lives of many more youth. And there's a big part of why this system must be gotten rid of in the only way possible, through revolution. I want to end with a very important announcement. Rise up! Rise up, October's on.
Yeah.
Dr. Cornel West and Carl Dix have initiated a call for a national major demonstration against police terror here in New York. Rise up, October, to stop police terror. Saturday, October 24th, here in New York City. Go to stopmassincarceration.net. Stopmassincarceration.net. Indict!
Convict! Send those criminals to jail! The whole damn system is guilty as hell! Indict! Convict! Send those prison cars to jail! The whole damn system is guilty as hell! Indict! Convict! Send those prison cars to jail! The whole damn system is guilty as hell!
Text to raise the age and get updates on how to make sure the legislation happens. As I said earlier, we have about a week before this legislation can get passed. After next week, the legislative session ends, and we can't get any legislation passed. We have to wait for a whole other year to take 16 and 17-year-olds out of adult jails and prisons. Pay close attention and watch the Justice League's Twitter. We're going to be letting folks know what the next action is, and also folks will be going to Albany really soon next week to probably do some stuff to shake up the Senate to make sure it happens. So, Palmer, you have the information?
I will.
The vote has to happen before the end of next week. They've been in session since January.